Hey everybody, today I want to talk about 10 things I think you should discuss with your landlord before you move in, before you sign a lease. 10 things you should question. Janet and I have been in this house now for 1 year, and there's a few things I forgot to make clear before I moved in. And who's going to take care of the repairs? I didn't have anything in writing. I really didn't have an understanding. I've always thought I'm going to handle anything small, anything that's like normal wear and tear by me. You know, if I break something, I'll fix it. A small water leak, I'll fix it. But what if there's a major problem? What if you get a nest of rats or mice in the ceiling? What if you have a large ant problem? What if the access road you have is no longer available to you? Say you have a car and now the road can only fit a motorbike. I'm not going to talk about too many chickens, too many dogs, too many roosters. That's up to you to check out the neighborhood to make sure you want to live in that neighborhood. Same thing with the karaoke. But we're talking about the house or the apartment you're going to move into. I have a list of 10 different questions that you should ask your landlord. And the first question is, one of the biggest things you have to do is determine how much the rent is and also determine how much the deposit is. Here in the Philippines, I've noticed they ask for 2 months deposit. And I am noticing that out of those 2 months deposit, if you have an agent showing you the unit and that agent brings you to the landlord and you sign a lease, usually one of those 2 months deposit is given to the agent as their fee. If you find a place by yourself, there's no reason for 2 months deposit because they're not paying a commission to any agent. Also the rent. I honestly believe whatever rent you see out there, you can negotiate down a minimum of 10%. Many of these landlords I've talked to have said to me, well, we need to have the price up because people want to negotiate down. They've already calculated that you're going to want to negotiate 10 or 15% down, and they've increased the price by that amount. So don't be afraid to negotiate. Negotiating is a skill. It's accepted here. Do the best to negotiate the best rent for you and the best price for you. Also the terms of the lease. If you're going to stay here 6 months or 1 year, make sure you get the length of a lease that you need. If you're only going to be here a few months, make sure that's in the lease. If it's a month to month, you have to make sure that you're going to get your deposit just as you move out. There's no reason for them to keep a large deposit once you move out of a month-to-month place. And the thought of paying cash up front for a whole year, that might have been a good idea in the past to get your rent down. I just think you can negotiate 10% down and pay month to month. You never know what's going to happen. What if you need to break your lease? If you pay for the whole year, you're locked in, or you're leaving and you're losing all that money. So I'm against paying for a whole year's lease. But if you're only going to stay 3 months and you can get a better price with paying 3 months up front, that's acceptable. But anything longer than that, you just don't know what the future holds. Same thing with the deposit. Negotiate that deposit. Spread it out over a period of time. Or tell them you're only going to pay 1 month's deposit. Whatever you want to do, use your negotiating skills. What utilities are your responsibilities? Do you pay the electric? Do you pay the drinking water? Do you pay the water that comes to the house for bathing and washing dishes? And do you pay to have the septic cleaned? Do you pay for the propane for the cooking gas? Do you pay for the Wi-Fi, the internet? Do you pay for cable if you're going to get cable television? Find out what is your responsibility and ask them for an estimation of the cost. Don't get caught by surprise. In our house, our bills come to the electric. It's a little bit high lately because of the summertime, about 4,700 pesos a month. Our water is 200. Our drinking water runs about 300 to 400 pesos a month. Our Wi-Fi, our internet, and our cable, which is one bill, runs about $30 to $40 a month depending on what speed of internet I want. Hit that like button and leave me a comment. Is there something I forgot to add? How are the monthly rent payments made? The last 2 out of 3 places I stayed, I sent the rent payment to the landlord's bank account. I was able to transfer the money from my bank account to their bank account, and I paid the rent that way. One place, the owner lived on the same property, and it was just a cash transaction first of the month. Find out who you're giving the rent to. If they want you to give it to a cousin, they want you to give it to someone other than them, make sure you get a written receipt. Write out your own receipt. Have them sign it. And then do like all the delivery guys here in the Philippines do. Take a picture of the guy holding the money that you paid the rent. Always know how you're going to pay your rent, what day it's due on, and maybe pay a few days early, just in case you have a hard time one month and you have to be late. Check the lease to see if there's a penalty for being late. Some leases here, they have a penalty, 5%, 10% if you're late. Some don't. Negotiate that if it is in the lease. Negotiate it out of the lease if you want. Negotiate everything. You have to have the art of negotiating when dealing with rental properties here in the Philippines. Will I be able to renew my lease? That's something you need to ask and have in writing. What if you really like the place and you really like where you're living and you've decided you want to live longer than your 1-year lease? You're going to want to live here an additional year or 2, or maybe even longer. Negotiate ahead of time that if you renew the lease, the rent price will stay the same. Get that in writing, because when your lease is up, if property values have gone up and rental costs have increased, the landlord's going to want to increase the rent. So get as much in writing as possible. And if you're thinking that you might want to live there long term, more than the 1 year, find out if you can renew your lease at the same cost. Have an option put in there. Whatever works best for you. What happens if I break the lease? Now this you should get in writing. If you break the lease, what is it going to cost you? Do you need to give 30-day notice and then there's a penalty of 1 extra month's rent? I don't know. This is for you to decide and negotiate with the landlord. But for some reason, if you sign a 1-year lease or longer lease and you decide you want to move to a different island, different part of town, you found a better house, you should know in advance what it's going to cost you to break your lease. In most cases, you just forfeit all your deposits. What furnishings and what appliances are included in the rent? You need to find out. And the good idea is to have everything listed in the lease that has been left in your care. This is all part of your deposit if something breaks. Take a video of everything, the condition, if things are broken already, you know, if a chair leg is almost ready to fall off. Make notes of these things. You're probably going to be responsible for them at the end of the year, at the end of your lease. A good idea is take a video of the whole unit, showing the walls, the fixtures, and everything that's included, so nobody can say there was a different item there, and have them listed. So when you do terminate your lease, or you get to the end of your lease, everybody knows what was supposed to be there, what is yours, and what belongs to the landlord. And also, who's responsible if something breaks? How are we going to handle repairs? Now, you need to talk to the landlord about repairs. You know, what if there's a water leak? Janet and I had a water line bust, and it was underground, and we didn't notice it. And at the end of the month, we had a water bill, not 200 pesos a month, but 4,200 pesos a month. Once we realized we had the leak, we contacted the landlord. They came out here and paid to have somebody fix it. I got stuck paying the additional water bill cost. So you need to discuss with the landlord about repairs. If a light bulb burns out, is that your responsibility? Some of these lights here are pretty difficult to change up in the ceiling. Also, if the gas stove breaks, the line that goes from the gas tank, the regulator, and it goes to your stove, if that has a leak. If the refrigerator breaks, how are you going to handle these items? Talk to the landlord ahead of time. The garage door doesn't open or close and it needs some maintenance. Is that something you have to do? And what about in the yard? What if you have a large yard? Is the landlord expecting you to do all the landscaping and the maintenance of the lawn and the trimming of the trees and the raking of the leaves? These are things you have to discuss. Are you going to pay for that? And if you do, maybe they can recommend somebody who will do it for you for a good price. Think about everything as you look at the house. The maintenance, things that could break. What if it comes with a television and after 6 months the television quits working? Are they going to replace it? Or do you have to buy a new television for them and replace that? Find out everything about the repairs, what the landlord's going to cover and what they won't cover. Put it in writing. It's the best way to do it. A handshake works, but sometimes if the cost gets expensive, people forget about the handshake. Will the rental unit be cleaned and all the repairs completed before you move in? This is a big deal. A lot of times you go look at a house or an apartment, it's just dirty. It needs some paint, it needs some touch up, it needs to be a good clean, the windows need to be cleaned. All these things you want done before you move in. Tell the landlord that. Point out everything you need done. If you need a new hot water unit for the shower, make sure it's all installed before you move in and all the cleaning is done before you move in. And make sure it's all done before you give the vast majority of your deposit and your first month's rent. Now you may have to give a reservation fee. That's a partial amount of rent for them to lock up the unit for you. But make sure everything is done that you needed done. The apartment is cleaned, the paint is touched up, everything is the way you want it before you hand over the deposit and you hand over that first month's rent. It's easier to get it done before they have the money and before your name's on the lease. It's harder to get done once they have your money, they have your signature, and they're gone. Can you have pets? Can you paint the walls? Is there a limit to how many people can stay there? The reason I bring all these up is right now you don't have a dog. Right now you don't have a cat, or maybe you do. Will they allow a cat? Will they allow a dog if you decide to get one? Find out in advance. Also, what if it's an ugly green or yellow wall and you want to change the color? Do you need to put it back to the original color when you move out? Do you have to do it? These are things you need to find out up front. If you don't like a wall, I'm going to push this back to when you negotiate for the property. Tell them you want the wall painted. You want it a different color. Tell them you'll buy the paint and they supply the labor. Something. Negotiate, negotiate. Everything's a negotiation here. And find out how many people can stay in the unit. Maybe right now it's just you, but in 2 months or 3 months you might have a girlfriend. You might fall in love with somebody and she might have a kid or two. Can all 3 of you or 4 of you live in that unit? Make sure there's no restrictions on how many people can live in your house or your apartment. How will my deposit be returned and how long will it take to receive it? You know, if they're going to just return your cash, is it going to be the day you move out and you hand them the key? Are they going to come and inspect the house or the apartment and then give you your deposit? Or are they going to hold on to it for a few days? It's easy to calculate the electric bill. It's easy to calculate the water bill that you haven't paid for yet and take that out of the deposit. You should be able to get your deposit pretty quick. 2 places I've rented, I got my deposit the next day. Once they were able to verify that the electronics were still working and nothing was broken in the unit. Make sure there's an understanding of how the deposit's going to get returned to you. Until next time.